Alright, so today we're going to go over chapter 3 and 4. Anthony, I know you got a dentist appointment. So what you don't get to, you need to make sure and read over. Of course, you'll be coming back, so you'll get your study guides. So next, like I said, next week we'll test on chapter 2, and then I guess the week after that we'll test chapters 3 and 4. That'll probably be the pattern we observe for the rest of the school year. So y'all have 2 weeks to study for each test. Okay, so it might kind of feel like we're really slugging through it because of how long a period it's going to be between when we go over the test and when we test, or go over the chapter and then test on it. It's going to be 2 weeks. So it might feel like, we're 2 weeks behind, but really we're just going at a slow pace. Okay, so chapter 3, domestic activities, page number 40. Page number 40. Okay. Everyone ready to go? Most people in Bible times got up early before the sun was up so that they could make the most of the hours of daylight and allow for the extreme heat at midday in the summer. I would note that. They got up before the sun. Okay. They needed to utilize all the hours of sunlight so that they could accomplish as much as they could during that time, because once the sun went down, what kind of lighting did you have? None, if not a candle, but that's not going to stay lit, outside if the wind's blowing, or you hope for a full moon, but still yet, it's not a lot of light. They don't have, street lamps, stuff like that, like what they do nowadays. All right, Abraham got up early to obey God's command to sacrifice Isaac. Probably was trying to get up and get gone before Mama woke up. That's Genesis 22:3. Moses got up early in the morning, and that was purely for comical reasons. I'm not trying to, blaspheme the word of God here, but that was for comical reasons. Okay, Moses got up early in the morning to meet God on Mount Sinai in Exodus 34, verse 4. Job offered worship early in the morning in Job 1, verse 5. And Jesus prayed before sunrise. So that is a theme, or not tradition, just something we see that's regular, getting up before the sun. That's not something we're unfamiliar with. Brother Anthony is familiar with that. Getting up before the sunrise, getting to work. And that's not something that, I will say the vast majority of people probably aren't familiar with that, especially in America. But in other parts of the world where, that's how they make their lifestyle. Of course, I know we have plenty of farmers and people that get up to observe that as well. But it's something we see throughout the Bible, from Abraham all the way to Christ. All right, next paragraph there. Although it was possible for a person to stay in bed, it was very difficult to do so in a small house because everyone slept together on the platform. Remember, there's a raised platform in the house, and everyone slept up on it beside each other. One person getting up would disturb the others. A point made when Jesus was telling the story of the friend who needed help with some extra food at midnight. Let's look at that. Let's look at those couple texts there. Proverbs 26, verse 14. I might transition to my Bible on my computer. Proverbs 26:14. As the door turneth upon his hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed. That's a pretty good picture there. As the door turns on its hinges, so does the slothful upon his bed. Not getting up. And it is easy to stay in bed. It's impossible. And then that Luke 11, verse 7 verse. if you get to it and want to read it, go ahead.
It says, and he from within shall answer and say, trouble me not, the door is now shut, and my children are with thee in my bed. I cannot rise and give thee.
Yeah, because if you had to get up, you're going to disturb the person sleeping beside you, and so you could have slept in, but it would have been hard to. Everyone sleeping there, and of course, then you get all the. I always tell this story when I remember when I first read through this as a student, and then when I taught it for a couple of years ago. Saturdays, or rather Sundays, especially when I started working in high school, Sundays I would, surprisingly, even though it was, church, the day I went to church, that was the day I got to sleep in. I got to sleep in a little later than usual, and but not much later, because when my Nana got up, she would clear the dishwasher, any dishes that were on the counter drying, making a lot of noise. Granddad, when he got up, of course, he was always the first awake, way before the sun rises. That's when he did his Bible reading before everybody got up, and he made coffee. And when he made coffee, he was quiet until he got his cup out of the cupboard up top, and he'd get it out, and then he'd shut it. And of course, all the cabinets line up with the wall that's adjoining my bedroom. So I heard it all, and so I didn't stay up much longer than usual, or sleep in much longer than usual. But it would have been even more hard to in this type of situation, because when we look at our pictures back, we have diagrams of houses here. It's all open. Everyone's can be right there on top of each other. A lot of work. A lot of work occurs in the morning hours, in the early hours. That's a cool part of the day. Of course, a lot of work has to be done then. All right, our next section there on breakfast. Breakfast was an informal meal taken sometime after getting up, a cake of bread with something inside, such as olives, cheese, or dried fruit. While the men and older boys left for their work, eating as they went, mother and girls did the domestic chores for the day, together with any boys too young to work and unable in early biblical years to go to school. The youngest minded any animals possessed by the family, such as David in 1 Samuel 16:11, while the others were busy in and about the house. I would note, all right there where it talks about it was an informal meal taken at the beginning of the day, sometime after getting up, and it was a cake. What I think of here is kind of like maybe like a muffin, or like it says, with something inside, such as olives, cheese, or dried fruit. So, could have been just bread, and then kind of like a meat pie, but not as heavy, with olives and cheese, dried fruit. All right. Also, where it talks about the youngest minded any animals possessed by the family. So that's what the youngest, that's what his chore was. All right. Milling. As soon as the men had disappeared, the hand mill was taken from its place on the platform and placed on a square of clean cloth. It was made of two disc-shaped stones about 12 to 18 inches across. The lower stone had an upright wooden stake that passed through an ample hole in the upper stone, which ideally was made of basalt, a lightweight rock. An upright handle fixed to the upper stone made it possible to rotate the stone about the wooden stake or pivot. Either barley grains, which would have been what the poor had, or wheat grains were put into the pivot hole as the top stone was being turned. The grain was crushed between the two stones and came out onto the cloth as flour. So that's what we're seeing them do right here in this picture. That's what's being described. Okay, I'm really glad they did that illustration, because what you see here would have been kind of hard to picture what's being described here in the text. So that illustration really helps because it's exactly what is being described there. Two women milling grain together. Notice the tall bread oven in the background. Almost want to say it looks like it's being done outside because it looks like there's a bush behind the bread oven. But yeah, would have been a good workout. Imagine they spent some time doing that. Of course, that's a pretty big stone too, so it probably made easy work of it. Okay, continuing there on page 42. A woman could do the milling by herself, but it was easier working with a companion. And we'll read that text in a minute. If possible, slaves were used to do this work, as Samson found out in prison, and as the Jews found in captivity. It was, however, a basic homely sound as the grain was milled. Okay, what they're saying, you hear grain being milled, yeah, it's a good sound, okay? Number one, it means you got food. It means you're taken care of. Jeremiah said that the absence of the sound would be a mark of the judgment of God. Some good stuff right there. Let's look at Matthew chapter 24, verse 41. Matthew 24:41, like I say, if anybody gets there and wants to read it, go ahead.
2 women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken and the other left.
Okay. It's talking about the rapture here.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not thinking of it. Okay. So yeah, it's we're talking about there. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken, the other left. So sitting there working, all of a sudden your companion's gone. I imagine with the context here, the meal might be forgotten for a while, because at the just shock that someone just disappeared in front of you. But like what's being said in the text, it could have been done on one's own, but it was easier working with a companion. Samson found out in prison that slaves were used to do this kind of work. The Jews also found it there. And let's look at the Lamentations text there. Lamentations 5, verse 13.
So they took the young men to grind, and the children fell under the wood.
So the what did it say? The old men or
They took the young men
the
to
young
grind.
men? Yeah, so they got put to the grinding stones to prepare the meal for possibly themselves and of course their captors. Okay, then Jeremiah 25:10.
It says, moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom. Is that right? Jeremiah 25:10. Yep. Okay. Let's see. And the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the candle.
The sound of the millstone. So that was a comforting sound in the household. All right. Fetching water. The 2 jobs outside the house, collecting water and going to the local market, were done by the older girls. Note that. Okay. Collecting water and going to the local market were done by the older girls. Water was fetched from the local well or spring at the beginning or end of the day. Why? At those times of the day.
It wasn't so
It
hot.
was cool. Very good. Abraham, or it says Eleazar, Abraham's servant, utilized this fact to seek guidance from God in choosing a wife for Isaac. He also knew that it was always the older unmarried girls who came to fetch the water. The water was carried in a large earthenware pitcher, either on the shoulder, the method adopted by Rebekah in Genesis 24:15, or on the hip. All right, what's being hinted at there? It was an older unmarried girl, so looking for a wife. Go to the well. All right, the woman at the well in the blue box there. The Samaritan woman came at the 6th hour of the day, midday, despite the heat, because she knew there would be no other women at the well. Furthermore, because of the lifestyle she was following, she did not want to talk to them. She had brought her own leather bucket to the well to get the water out. Woman at the well. All right, there we have at the bottom of the page an assortment of pots from Bible times. They were used for storage and at meal times. I guess if they were holding water or wine, that's why they would have been used at meal times. All right, shopping. If food was not available from one's own stores, it was necessary to go to the local market to purchase provisions. This was a daily task because it was not possible to keep food for more than a day in the hot climate without recourse to drying or salting. All right, that's important to know. All right, going to the market, getting fresh food had to be done every day. They didn't have refrigeration or, the commodities that we have today when it comes to, we can go to the supermarket and get all we need and for a week, and it'll hold over. And then, of course, we got deep freezers. We can keep meat, put a couple deer in it and, be good for a long time. They didn't have that. Now, what they could do, as it says there, they could dry or salt it. Okay, those methods are still done today, of course, but that would have been done to their meat or their their fruits, like making raisins or drying dates and stuff like that. Now, we're going to look at that a lot more in the next chapter too, when it comes to food. All right, so this practice lies behind the words in the Lord's Prayer, "Give us today our daily bread," where we pray for God's help to enable us to live one day at a time, day-to-day basis when it came to attaining food. And that's in Matthew 6:11. As part of the visit to the tradesmen, some families would collect bread that had been baked in the community oven. Hosea tells us how loaves were put in the oven overnight and were cooked slowly until taken out before the baker stirred up the fire in the morning again. And while Jeremiah was in prison, he received a daily loaf from the street of the bakers in Jerusalem. From the street. Okay. While the water and food was being collected, the mother and the other girls had plenty to do. All right, so while all the other work was being done, the water being collected at the well, the trip to the market being done, the floor of the house had to be swept carefully and the place made tidy, particularly if animals had slept inside overnight, and washing had to be done. The fire had to be fanned into a flame so that cooking could proceed. All right, so they weren't just sitting at home, lounging around, they were working diligently as well.
It went on Facebook.
Right. Yeah. By the time they were getting done, and probably the daughters getting back from the well and the market, that's about the time most people are probably waking up nowadays. And what's the first thing? I know a lot of times I don't even catch myself when I do it. I turn my alarm off. Of course, that's on my phone. And then I see the Facebook notifications. It's like they do it on purpose because nothing pops up. Like there's a certain point at the night where my phone goes silent. I stop getting notifications. But when I silence my alarm and unlock my phone, then all the notifications come through.
Yep.
And then we're off.
To the races.
Yeah, distracted from the very start of the day. All right, so there were a lot of things there they did. Swept the floor. Of course, Luke chapter 11, verse 25, if I'm not mistaken, that's she's searching for the lost coin there. I might be wrong. Luke chapter 11.
Chapter 11.
Yeah, I believe I was wrong on that. I think I'm thinking of chapter 13, maybe. No, wrong on that too. Okay. Luke 11:25, though, it reads, "And when he cometh, he findeth it swept and garnished." Yeah, so it's been swept and garnished, made tidy. Alright, especially had to be done if there are animals that had slept inside overnight. Washing had to be done, whether it been of cookware, what they had, or clothes. Of course, we learned about that in chapter 1, how they washed their clothes, and then the fire had to be fanned into a flame so that cooking could proceed. That was one thing that was important, keeping the fire going. You know, they had methods where they could leave it to, kind of smolder overnight, and all they needed in the morning was just to be fanned, or even just to blow upon it, and it would, produce a flame, and then you could start throwing your fuel on there, which for them would have been fire, or firewood. Okay, baking bread. Bread was the basic food. Flour from the hand mill was mixed with water, and the dough was placed on flat stones that had been heated. If the bread was to be leavened, a piece of dough from the previous day, the leaven, was put into the new dough, and the whole lump left by the fire until the yeast in the old dough had permeated the whole. Okay, so that was the process of leavening the bread, making your bread and leavening it. Okay, so just kind of know the process of leavening was just done by taking a piece of the bread from the day before, the dough
What do you
from the
mean
day
by
before.
leaven?
It's like adding yeast to it.
Oh,
When you leaven the bread, it rises.
And then then putting it by the oven, that's kind of like letting it proof.
okay.
I remember my nana was making, I think she was making dinner rolls one time or something like that. She'd set it down by the heater on the floor, and I was like, "What in the world is happening here?" And so I went there and picked it up and moved it back. She'd been outside. She's like, "What have you done?" And I was like, "That's unsanitary. It was down on the floor by the heater." She's like, "No," and then I was told to get out of the kitchen. But don't. I just learned if something seems out of place, don't touch it. Yeah. All right. And then we have some text there, Matthew 13:33 and Galatians 5:9. It was then baked that way. So then they would take the dough that had been permeated throughout with the leavening from the day old dough. Then it was baked. Other methods of baking bread were with the use of primitive ovens. One form was an earthenware dish that was inverted over the fire, the bread cakes being placed on the convex surface. Another was in the form of a truncated cone with an opening at the bottom for the fire. The bread cakes were stuck onto the inside of the cone. And I'm going to try and find a picture of that and show you all. But what you have there on the next page, that's it actually. Both of them, I do believe. At the bottom's an oven, but at the top, there's that. They would just lay the bread on top. Now, they probably would have they might have had something metal like that, but it would have been more likely to be like some type of clay or like a clay surface or perhaps rock. But it would have that convex surface where they would place the dough for it to cook. Not until Roman times was an earthenware oven invented in which the firebox was separated from the cooking area and so made thicker loaves a possibility. Interesting. In fact, any earthenware receptacle or even an earth pit where it was possible to get heat to the dough could be utilized as an oven. Paper-thin loaves, biscuit-sized loaves, and heavier cakes of bread were all made in this way. Compare the paper-thin bread used to scoop out the sauce in Matthew 26:23 with the lunch biscuits in John 6:9 and the much heavier loaf in Judges 7:13. Well, I assume We must. So let's look at these. Matthew 26:23. This is at the Last Supper, I believe. Yes. Matthew 26:23 reads, And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. And we'll see this kind of pictured, well, maybe here in the next little bit, but definitely when we talk about the food meals too. So it was like I always picture it as being like a tortilla or something. That's what's being talked about there. Paper thin bread, almost like what is it, like a crepe. All right, then we got the lunch biscuits in John chapter 6, verse 9.
There's a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many?
They're about to find out. All right, then the much heavier loaf in Judges chapter 7, verse 13. Judges 7:13. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream. That told a dream unto his fellow, and said, Behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it, that it fell, and overturned it, and the tent lay along. Yeah, brick. Smote the one who had struck. All right, a metal tray was sometimes, so that proves, or is what I was talking about earlier. A metal tray was sometimes put on the fire so that grains could be placed over the fire. As the grains popped, they formed popped corn or parched corn. Now, corn, I don't know if it would have been corn. I don't think there was corn in that part of the world until, I thought that was discovered in the Americas, but I might be wrong on that. But it would have been the same thing with the grains that they would have collected over there. They would have popped. Okay. And that may or may not be on the test. That might be like a bonus question or something like that, talking about popped or parched corn. All right. So the siesta. As the heat of the day approached, it was time.
Sorry.
Bless you.
All right, so as the heat of the day approached, it was time for a siesta out of the sun. Abraham sat in the door of his tent for siesta in Genesis 18:1. Saul went into a cave in 1 Samuel 24:3, and Ishbosheth stayed in his house. 2 Samuel 4:5.
See, naps are biblical.
I just for this. Yes,
Mhm.
What do you mean?
Nap. Siesta means party.
Oh,
Siesta means nap.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
All right, the evening, or this picture up here, I know we pointed out earlier, but the caption for it reads, A Bedouin woman bakes pita bread on a large pan inverted over the fire. So that's, I was trying to think of that earlier. It's pita bread, not a,
Yeah.
It's like a tortilla, but honestly, I think,
Less tasty.
yeah, but I don't know.
I like
You make me a euro,
Yes.
Yeah. my stomach starts growling. I blame the book. All right, the evening meal. Following the midday rest, there were a number of important activities. The evening meal had to be prepared on the fire for the men when they returned from work. This normally consisted of vegetables or a lentil stew, which was scooped out of the common pot with a piece of thin bread. So, today, you make a pot of, let's just say like chili, you make your bowl, and your bowl, it's yours. But then, it wouldn't have been this probably, I don't know what lentil stew is, but it would have been like scooped out. Everyone would have had their hand in the pot. I imagine I've seen how they eat. They don't get their hand in it. They roll the bread into a spoon pretty much and dip it out. And but still yeah. But that is still how they eat in a lot of places in the world. Brother Chris here at Antioch, he had shared with me one time. He had went on a mission trip to Africa. I can't remember what part of Africa, but that was one of the meals that they had. It was they had it there in front of you, and everyone gathered around, and everyone scooped out of it. And there are some points I think he said where they were they used their hands, but it is.
I'm okay
what
with
it
it.
is.
Yeah.
All right, there our next paragraph. On special occasions, such as a festival or when a sacrifice had been made, meat was added to the stew. At Passover, the meat was roasted. Blood had to be drained from the meat, and in later times, meat could not be served with dairy products. There were also strict food laws about what meat might and might not be eaten. Of course, you read about a bunch of their dietary laws regarding meat in Leviticus 11. The meal would be finished with fresh or dried fruit. Something sweet at the end. Some things to note there. All right. The special occasions where they would add meat to the stew, or festivals, or when a sacrifice had been made. So note that. Be familiar with that.
What is it?
Right there, the special occasions where meat was added to the stew, festivals, and when a sacrifice had been made. Also, maybe how they would finish the meal with fresh or dried fruit. Okay, 2 basic meals, a blue box there on page 45. Jesus literally said, when you make a breakfast or an evening meal, call not your friends. He was referring to the 2 basic meals of the day. Okay, now I'm curious. All right, Luke 14, verse 12. I want to know the context here. Okay, Jesus is attending a banquet here, and he put forth a parable to those which were bidden when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, we'll just get down to verse 12 where he's talking. Then he said also to him that bade him, when thou makest a dinner or a supper, call not thy friends, nor thy brethren, neither thy kinsmen, nor thy rich neighbors, lest they also bid thee again, and a recompense be made thee. But when thou makest a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and thou shalt be blessed. For they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just.
So, let's say,
Talking about being recompensed there, being, almost like you're doing it, I don't want to say for payment, but that's kind of the idea there, or to be rewarded with a favor or something like that. But he's saying when you make a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, those that
Can't be that.
right, and you will be blessed, for they cannot recompense thee. And then he says, for you will be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. I don't think enough people aim their ministry, their outreach efforts toward the needy. Those that are down on their luck, we want to reach those that live in the good neighborhoods that can pay a good tithe, it's going to make us look good. Those aren't the ones that Jesus encountered them, but when you look at who his ministry was aimed at, it was those, I say like us, the low. All right. let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and finish out this chapter. It's just another half page worth of words, and then we'll get into the next chapter. So just a short break, and then we'll get back into it. All right. Let's finish out chapter 3. Page number 45, crafts. Another important activity was spinning and weaving to make family clothing and craft work for sale. The ideal wife in Proverbs 31 is described as one who seeks for wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She spins, weaves, and makes clothes, provides rugs and coverings for the home, and sells a surplus at the market. It was while she was busy at this kind of work that she would talk to other women and to the children. Washing. At some time during the day, people needed to wash. If Bathsheba was typical, this took place at the end of the day, 2 Samuel 11:12. The normal small house seldom had bathing facilities. Only in the homes of the wealthy could a room be provided with a bathtub. More common was a shallow earthenware bowl with a ridge in the middle for the feet. A full bath had to be taken in a spring or at the river. Even Pharaoh's daughter bathed in the river. And Elisha seems to have referred to this practice when he told Naaman to go and take a bath in the river Jordan. Once the meal was over and darkness came, people would go to bed early so as to be up with the sun the following morning. That picture there on page 45, of course, we kind of covered it before we took a break. The family gather around common dishes for their evening meal. I guess that's lentil stew there in the big bowl. See some grapes, Brussels sprouts maybe, some other stuff.
It's the same soup Esau would make when brother coming in hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Little soup.
venison or lentil. Yeah, you might be right on that. All right, page 46, we'll look at this little yellow rectangle there with the picture, a woman's job. Since it was always the woman's job to carry water, a man doing the job would be distinctive enough to be identified quickly. Jesus therefore used this means to help Peter and John locate the room where the Last Supper was to be prepared. Let's look at that. What's the reference in y'all's book at the end?
Oh wait, there's Mark 14:13 and there's Luke 27.
Yeah. We'll look at what's the Luke
7, 8,
27. Okay. Because that might be the wrong reference there. So I think Luke 27 is post-resurrection. And also, there is no Luke.
That's what I was like.
What?
Because I had marked it down here and I couldn't quite. So it's Luke chapter 22 is where the text is from, verses 8 through 12. And he sent Peter and John, saying, Go and prepare us the Passover, that we may eat. And they said unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare? Where do you want us to go and prepare? And he said unto them, Behold, when ye are entered into the city, there shall be a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entered in. And ye shall say unto the good man of the house, The master saith unto thee, Where is the guest chamber, where I shall eat Passover with my disciples? And he shall show you a large upper room, furnished. There make ready. Okay, then let's look at the Mark reference as well. Mark 14:13. And he sendeth forth, it's just another account of it. And he sendeth forth 2 of his disciples, and saith unto them, Go ye into the city, and there shall meet you a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him. Yeah, so that would have been very distinctive. A man carrying a water pot, fetching water. So, when it was usually the woman's job. All right. Since we finished up a chapter, about to start number 4, any questions or comments?
So the men, what did they do? They do hunting and gardening and stuff while the women
Farming,
did all this?
you know, making war, but yeah, farming. Okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
like that.
Chapter 4. Or any other questions? All right. Food and meals. We have already looked at the 2 meals of the day as part of the day's activities. Here we bring together additional information about food and meals. Bread. For most people, food was simple. Bread, olives, cheese, fruit, and vegetables formed the staple diet. Meat was eaten on rare occasions. Bread was so basic a food that it became synonymous with life itself. Eating bread was the equivalent phrase for having a meal. So you're eating bread, having a meal, because it was at every meal. Genesis 43:31-32 references, or it gives us, well, I'll just read from the beginning. The Egyptians could not eat bread with the Hebrews. I guess just not having relations there. Give us each day our daily bread. There was a prayer for daily provision of food itself. Bread was something so basic and so special that Jesus referred to himself as the bread of life in John 6:35. Bread seems always to have been broken and never cut with a knife, which gave rise to the phrase to break bread, used in Acts 27 to describe the communion service or the Lord's Supper. Bread made from barley was less favored than wheat bread. It was also cheaper. In addition to being used for bread, grain was also parched by heating the grains on a metal plate over the fire, and was often eaten raw when people were walking through the grain fields. As you're walking through the grain fields, just reach out and pull grain off the top of the stalk there. My uncle, he took me for a ride one time on a 4-wheeler, and there was a farmer that was growing, I assume it was wheat. I hope it was, because he parked us and we're in the middle of this field on a trail, and it's beautiful. The wind was blowing, and he just reached out and grabbed the top of this plant. And, I've done that before, just running my hand through and just grabbing what's off top and then just throwing it back of my brother's head or something like that, getting it all in his hair. But then he pops it in his mouth.
Oh.
And I was concerned a little bit, because I was like, what if there's a bug or something on that? And but that's, they were even that's depicted in The Chosen as well, when they picked it on the Sabbath and got in trouble. Okay, there is a well-known example of this. Okay, this is right here, what I was just talking about, where they depicted in The Chosen. There's a well-known example of this when the disciples of Jesus were told that they should not eat raw grain on the Sabbath in Matthew 12:1. Such grain was known as new grain in Leviticus 23:14. Okay, back on the first page of the chapter, we see an artist's impression of Jesus eating with his friends, the sisters Mary and Martha and Bethany. I don't know if they have, I imagine they have tomatoes over there. I don't know if that's what that is, though.
Pomegranate.
You're probably right. Because I do know they have that over there. Yeah. All right, page 48. The above picture, bread making in the market inside Jerusalem's Damascus Gate. Looks like he's spitting a pizza. The guy on the right. All right, then the page on the bottom. Well, we're going to talk about this in a minute. We'll go ahead and look at it since I pointed it out. A Bedouin woman prepares soft cheese called lebanon in a sheepskin bag at her encampment near Arid in southern Israel.
So what's a Bedouin?
A Bedouin, sand dwellers. We talked about them in the last chapter. Traveling nomads. They might settle and pitch their tents in one area for a time, and then as the seasons change or the grazing areas for the cattle diminish, or the cattle or whatever their herds consist of, they might pick up their tents and move to the next area.
So this daytime would be called a rambler.
Yeah. Vegetables. Vegetables were also in common use. Beans and lentils were common throughout the Old Testament period. Ezekiel 4:9 references there, take wheat, barley, beans and lentils, millet, and spelt. I'll look those up here in a minute. It was a lentil-based stew that Jacob cooked and gave to Esau. There you go, you were right. Genesis chapter 25, 33, and 34.
Like you have it wrong. Not with the soup, but with the person that cooked
Okay.
it.
Beans were given to David when he fled from Absalom, 2 Samuel 17:28. Leeks, onions, garlic, cucumbers, and melons were familiar in Egypt. Remember, that's one thing they were complaining about, we can go back there where there were, and they start listing off some of the stuff. I guess they were tired of eating.
You I didn't even know what a leek was until I moved to Missouri and I worked at Big City Lot.
Oh, yeah?
It ain't nothing but a green onion, so gigantic size green onion, you know what I'm saying? I didn't know what bok choy was. I mean, a lot of stuff there, they had all fresh vegetables. I mean, any that type of vegetable you can name, we ate it,
Yeah. All right, milk. Milk was another basic food and was obtained from most of the animals that were herded. Some of it was fermented to produce yogurt, and it is this that is sometimes referred to as milk. And those references there, so instead of it talking about milk there, it's talking about yogurt.
Is that really how you spell yogurt?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that. I hate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of them silent H's.
Oh.
Yeah. It's there, but we don't know why. Or we might, but I know. It's just how it's spelled. Some of it was churned to provide butter, the milk that is. Proverbs 30, verse 33. Milk was placed in a skin bag. That's what we see down here. And except she's making cheese. Skin bag, and the bag was alternately shaken and squeezed until the butter was formed. Milk was also used to make cheese. Presumably, the buttermilk would have been used too, but it is never mentioned in the Bible. Yeah. I don't know if y'all are fans of buttermilk, but
Not by itself.
I'm not. My granddad loves it. My nana, every time he would. I remember there was a time he didn't really ever go. I can't ever really remember him going grocery shopping with us, but I would go with her. And I remember one time he did go with us, and he didn't grab like a gallon or even like a half gallon, but just a small little carton of buttermilk, and he put it in the cart. And I remember her looking at me and just going, ugh. And then of course he was the only one that drank it too. But it didn't stay in there very long.
Older people drink buttermilk
It's
and
good for
cornbread. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
now I've had it like that. That's not bad.
Yeah.
But just by itself, not my cup of milk, if you know what I'm saying. All right, meat and fish. Meat and fish were luxury foods and were confined to the wealthy except at times of festival and sacrifice. King Solomon had meat in regular variety: beef, mutton, game, and fowl. I guess this is, that 1 Kings 4:23 reference. Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, 20 of pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. So, the spread. He had it all. Abraham served veal to his guests in Genesis 18:7, and Gideon's guests ate goat meat in Judges 6:19. So it's also something you might break out if you had a guest that you wanted to honor. Meat was normally boiled as part of a stew because this naturally followed the draining of blood that was required by the law. However, meat could be roasted if care was used. The sons of Eli preferred roast meat to boiled meat. And I'm going to say I do too.
Mm-hmm.
Meat from herded animals was supplemented by meat from hunting. The valley of the River Jordan was plentiful in wild animals during Bible times. Trapping of animals in a net or in a pit was common, and birds were trapped too. All right, fish were also available, but some varieties were forbidden for food, like the bottom feeders, like catfish.
Catfish.
Yeah, that's a no-no to the Levitic law. The work of the disciples of Jesus evidenced that much fishing was carried out or carried on at that time on the Sea of Galilee. Of course, many of his disciples were fishermen. Fish were similar enough for Jesus to use in his parables. Fish is something that everybody was familiar with, and so therefore it was often used in his parables. Because that's what we see a lot. Now, sometimes his parables weren't understood, but a lot of times there was common imagery in them that people would have understood, been familiar with. All right, eggs do not seem to have been used for food until late Old Testament times, although they were familiar enough to Jesus. All right. All right, we got the picture there at the bottom. Fishermen unload their catch from the waters of the Sea of Galilee at a harbor near Tiberias. Yeah, and that's about what they catch there, those little sardine-like fish. All right, meat without blood, the blue box on page 49. The first century Christians were encouraged to follow the Jewish food laws concerning the draining of the blood from the animal. It is difficult to know for sure why the Jews were forbidden to eat blood. It might have been purely ritual because life and blood are identified and the life belongs to God. The blood was therefore used as a means of atonement with God. The prohibition against eating blood might have been based on an earlier practice that was intensely cruel. Because meat would not keep, some tribes people cut parts from an animal and then kept the animal alive until more meat was required. The draining of blood prevented such practices. The prohibition might have been a health law to prevent blood-borne infections and diseases. I'm leaning more toward the first possible reason and the third one. The second one, I can see that possibly being a reason because God didn't want his people to be like those around them, okay? Those that they were going in to conquer, to take the land of Canaan from the promised land. God didn't want his people to be like them. And plus, that is very cruel. What's being talked about there. Okay, page 50. Fruit. Fruit was another necessary part of the diet. Olives were grown for eating and for use as cooking oil. Olive oil was mixed with flour and used for frying. So, that's even that Leviticus 2:5. That's one of the sacrifices. I remember I pointed that out one time. The way they talk about you even like put it in flour and then in the oil. I'm like, that's sounds like a good time to me. Fresh figs and dried figs were available. Fresh grapes were eaten, whereas others were dried as raisins. Pomegranates were popular, and melons had been eaten in Egypt. Locust beans, sometimes called carobs, were a useful sweetmeat or candy, and almond and pistachio nuts were always around. Dates are not mentioned in the Bible, but there are plenty of references to them in Jewish literature. Be familiar with maybe some of these fruits, just maybe list a couple of them that they were familiar with. Figs, grapes, pomegranates. melons, but just know that they had melons in Egypt. That's something that they only had in Egypt during the captivity there. Okay, at the top of the page we have a picture of all kinds of good-looking stuff there. Sacks of grains, pulses, and dried fruit on sale at Beersheba's Bedouin Camel Market. So that had been brought in by that almost looks like cornflakes.
That's what I thought
You know,
too.
like frosted flakes.
Mm-hmm.
There toward the right, second one from the right. And then all the different pastas and stuff there too. I wonder if they had, I doubt it, but pasta in Bible times like that.
You like spaghetti, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's spaghetti noodles and all the other macaroni noodles and
The shells.
Bible
Morning.
rotinis.
Oh, I didn't know y'all was in class.
Hey.
I had said y'all were having tests, the door was shut. I said, no, they were in the test. I didn't mean to disturb you.
you're fine. Yeah, and this right here, until a couple years ago, I didn't know what an almond looked like when it came off the tree. But this right here, this one right here, that bag, that's a bag of almonds that have not been cracked yet. And, yeah, I didn't know until I bought like a bag of like holiday mixed nuts, like you crack with and it said almonds. I was like, what in the world? And there's just this. It's basically the shell looks exactly like an almond, but of course it's kind of like a coconut husk, not husk, but shell, but real coarse on the outside. Anywho, moving on. Honey. I know this is a tough chapter, but we're about to get to the locust, so maybe that'll
well, there we
bite a
go.
little bit. Honey. Honey was used for sweetening because there was no sugar. There are many examples in the Bible in which honey was obtained from wild bees. Samson found it in the carcass of a lion. Jonathan found it in a forest, and Moses found honey in a rock hole. There's honey. Bees were colonized in hives in Egypt and Assyria, and this may have been taken up by the Jews by New Testament times. Might have been something that they had brought back from the captivity. When grape juice was boiled down, it became a sweet, sticky syrup, and this too may have been referred to as honey in some Bible passages. It was spread on bread and sometimes diluted with water and drink. Jacob sent this to Joseph in Egypt in Genesis 43:11, and it was exported to the Phoenicians. Okay. All right, maybe some things to note there, that honey was used for sweetening because there was no sugar. And then maybe also that you could boil grape juice and it became sticky syrup. All right, salt. Seasoning was limited to salt, obtainable from the endless supplies in the salt hills near the Dead Sea. It was used to flavor and preserve food. In New Testament times, there was a thriving industry based at Magdala, where fish were salted and exported. Does Magdala ring a bell?
Looks like it. I don't know.
Mary Magdalene?
Ah.
She's from Magdala. Not until Greek and Roman times were other seasoning spices readily available, and this developed as trade grew. So as trade grew and new trade routes were discovered or made, more spices became available. Salt was believed to have healing properties and was also used in sacrificial offerings. This may have led to the custom of using it in a meal held to celebrate the signing of an agreement. And also it was, in some parts where you share, when you welcome people, it's like salt and bread. You dip the bread in the salt. That was a custom in some areas. And another thing, I don't think it talks about it, or it might be at the table. I don't think I see it there. If you had an honored guest, or if you didn't and you just had the father, that's who the salt cup or the bowl would be closest to. If the salt bowl was right there for you to easily get to, you were considered an honored guest. So, I kind of, when my Nana and Granddad come to my house and have a meal, I always put the salt in front of him. I kind of do it in a light manner, but still yet, I'm serious about it. But of course, I don't have salt shakers at the house. I actually have a salt bowl. But anywho, Brother Anthony, whenever you need to go, you're good. Because we're practically at the end of the chapter.
So you say you got a salt bowl. What is it?
It's just instead of like having a salt shaker, I just have like a salt bowl that has coarse salt in it, and I'll finishing. I don't use a lot when I'm cooking, but at the end I use other spices and stuff, but kind of helps cut back a little bit on the sodium, just using it to finish at the end. But
Yeah, I try to base my cooking off not salt. I use garlic salt, but not regular salt.
yeah. All right, that locust or locust beans. It was perfectly all right under the food laws to eat locusts. It is much more likely, however, as locusts were not readily available all the time, and John the Baptist had to eat daily, that locust beans are being referred to. These beans or carob pods are sweet and sticky. The prodigal son was also glad to eat the same food in Luke 15:16. So
that's the same stuff they fed the hogs,
Yeah. Luke 15:16. Let's look at it real quick. Luke 15, verse 16. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. Yep. That's exactly what we're talking about there. All right, now let's look at some locust.
That's what I'm looking at too. I feel like they're referring to like grasshoppers here, not like cicadas. Just
This is a grasshopper, not a locust though.
Yeah, big grasshopper.
well, I think that's
Well, that like right there, that looks like a grasshopper. When I think of yeah, but like I don't know if they're talking about something like a cicada.
but Latin locusta means grasshopper.
Yeah, grasshopper.
Well, that's what I thought a locust was just going to be, grasshopper.
I always
Okay.
thought locusts were
So what's them
cicadas.
things
I
that
did
get
too.
stuck on the trees?
Cicadas.
Oh, cicada. Would they come out the shell?
But I
And the shell
always
be
call them
stuck.
locusts.
Yeah.
I
That
don't think that's. I don't know if they're technically locusts or if they could be turned into locusts. I've always known them as cicadas, but I do know dogs eat them, or at least
Yes.
one of mine did.
So the
I had a-
cicada is
a lot
the
of
thing
voice.
that you hear when you
Yeah.
get a certain
Yeah.
temperature.
Yep.
Yeah.
that noise.
You get over 80 degrees, you hear a cicada.
Then you get that little shell.
It'll be stuck on the tree.
African
You
locust
used to
bean.
hang them on you.
This is, I guess, these are what are being referenced here. These locust beans. I don't know. It doesn't look like you break a tooth off on one. I don't know. Oh well.
Heard of chocolate covered ones. Oh yeah.
Side covered locust.
I mean,
Grasshoppers.
I have eaten bugs before, but
Yeah, me
like,
too.
to live off them,
That's a locust bean.
Oh.
Oh, what?
Locust bean.
Locust bean?
Yeah.
So that's not an insect.
No,
It's a bean
Mhm.
that hangs from the tree.
fresh, fermented, and processed Nigerian locust beans.
Oh.
Healthy and delicious beans.
Hell,
I don't know if those. Oh, I'm sitting here thinking y'all are seeing what I'm seeing on my screen.
Ah,
Whoops.
oh, there's the locust bean.
Yeah, those are
What?
fermented and processed.
I feel like I'd be willing
So-
to try that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm always willing to try something once.
I mean, I've eaten crickets and all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Like cooked crickets or just a regular little jumping
I've
around?
eaten both.
Just hopping around. Was he alive when you ate him? Yeah. How did that work out?
Somebody bet me that I wouldn't do it.
You
And
did
I
it.
needed that money with. I've eaten a worm before too, but I will not do that.
Oh, it wiggles.
Ah, horrible.
One of the first years I was a sponsor for our youth group taking them to camp. Actually, I think it was the first year I was the lead sponsor. I was the only adult that was there, and I think I took a group of 15 boys. And it was at the end of the night. They were all running back and forth to the shower house, brushing teeth, stuff like that, getting ready for the devotional. And I was sitting there on my bed, and someone had, of course, in the process of all of the boys and the boys from the other church that was with us going in and out the door, some bugs had gotten in, and one of them was like a little beetle, and it was crawling around on my bed, and the boys were sitting there around it, poking at it, and I was like, oh, come on. I was like, stop messing with it, put it out of its misery, or throw it outside. And they're like, what do you mean, put it out of its misery? And I was like, I grabbed it, and they're like, oh, no, don't kill that beetle. And I was like, okay. And I popped it in my mouth.
You did?
I popped it right in my mouth. And, of course, then all of them are shocked.
Oh my gosh.
And then my cousin, if my cousin wasn't there, I wouldn't have done this. But he was sitting right across from me. I just went and spit that beetle right out on him. But yeah, I wasn't about to eat that beetle. Yeah.
Yeah, rather hard shell.
A lot of crunching.
Okay. Just the last couple pages here. Page number 52. Or do y'all need to take a break? No?
I'm just kidding.
I mean,
Do it?
No.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't know, you don't
we
need.
still got a whole hour until we're technically supposed to be done.
Take a little break, Steve.
Alright, so I've got a little video that I can't remember which class I watched this for, but I had a hard time finding it. I had to scroll through a lot of videos to find it. But it's biblical images come to life in a Nazareth village. Just to be safe. Okay. A visit in a Nazareth village. It says, nowhere else in the world can you get a better impression of the town where Jesus grew up than in Nazareth Village, an accurate replica of a first century Galilean farming village. So you can go, when you go and visit this area in Israel, and take a tour of this replica village. Well, or system of cooking area. Almost that's well. Or system.
wonderful. International troops. Great. Here on the farm surrounded by olive trees. Most of the olive trees that you see were transplanted here from other places. Okay, they're very strong. They almost always survive. We're also at a special time of year. If you look closely, you will see the little olives growing on the olive trees. Olive trees also live a very long time. This is our oldest olive tree. It's more than 400. And they can grow into the thousands of years. I want to draw your attention over here to the new shoots growing up from the roots of the tree. We have a special word for these in Hebrew. The word is netzer. Netzer. Do you mind trying to say netzer, please? Thank you. Netzer is where we get the word for Nazareth from. Natzeret. Netzer, Natzeret. So in a sense, Nazareth means new shoot. Right? So the netzer, and they're the babies of the tree. Right? To plant a new olive tree, we cut the netza with a piece of root that it's growing on, and we transplant it, and this becomes a new olive tree.
Similar to how bamboo spreads too.
The prophet Isaiah, in chapter 11, verse 1, talks about this picture. It's very suggestive of a descendant. He says, a new shoot will grow up from the roots of Jesse. Now Jesse is the father of King David, who is the forefather of Yeshua, Jesus, according to his human genealogy. And so we believe that this is the prophetic picture that is fulfilled in Jesus' life.
It makes it kind of hard to hear those times. Shepherd. I wonder if they shook hands back
And our small flock of sheep. Now, of course, the picture of the shepherd and the sheep is very, very biblical. So probably the most famous example is Psalm 23, right? The Lord is my shepherd. Then Yeshua, Jesus comes, and in John chapter 10, he reuses these same pictures to talk about himself. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd.
Someone translating in the background.
And the sheep hear my voice and follow after me. Jesus is constantly using these pictures to refer to himself. For us, if we're Christians, then we take this in stride. Oh yeah, of course. But for Jesus' first century audience, a Jewish audience, this would be terribly shocking. Right? Here's a man. He's real man. Jesus was a man. Eats, sleeps, cries, gets tired. And he's using language that up until this point in history was exclusively used for God. So it would be very, very difficult for Jesus' listeners to understand. We now understand, because of the New Testament, that Jesus had to be fully man and fully God, and therefore sinless, and so his death on the cross can pay for our sins. If he wasn't sinless, then he's just a martyr. And Jesus also says, right, talks about the parable of the 99 and the 1. He's constantly using the image of shepherd and sheep. Very significant. Was significant in the Old Testament and is significant in the New Testament as well. Thank you, Elijah.
Amen. Thank you.
Good information there, but I was mainly showing it for just kind of getting a look, real life replica of. Now, if y'all did something like this, you definitely pass. But looking at stuff like this can help you get an idea of maybe a replica if you have a hard time. You're having a hard time picking what you want to do. Okay. All right, let's finish out our our chapter here, page 51, with hand washing. Before meals were eaten, the hands were always washed under running water. Always washed under running water. Because there were no utensils such as knives, forks, and spoons. In a wealthy home, this task would be performed by a servant. Elisha used to pour water over the hands of Elijah. By New Testament times, this had become something of a ritual. Jesus reacted against the mere ritualization of practice, just doing things out of, it being habit, and not looking at the significance behind it. That's what he's reacted to there. All right, he took on the role of a servant in washing the feet, but not the hands of the disciples at the Last Supper. The hands were also washed at the end of the meal. Thanksgiving was offered for the meal. Traditionally, this is what was said: "Blessed art thou, Jehovah our God, King of the world, who causes to come forth bread from the earth." Jesus could have used such a blessing at the feeding of the 5,000. Might have been something along that line that he uttered there when he blessed the food. Just as Samuel may have done centuries before. Okay, I want to look at the 1 Samuel reference. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 13. Okay. And you want to read it?
As soon as ye be come into the city, ye shall straightway find him, before he go up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he come, because he doth bless the sacrifice, and afterwards they eat that be bidden. Now therefore get you up, for about this time ye shall find him.
All right. Let's see here. Of course, we got this picture here at the bottom. Before meals were eaten, the hands were always washed, because food was eaten by hand, as there were no utensils such as knives, forks, and spoons. Looks like they're using an offering plate there.
Mhm.
Or at least that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay. Salt underfoot. Let's read that blue box there on page 52. When salt was collected from the Dead Sea area, some of it was good for salting and cooking, but other salt had lost its saltiness. This salt was not thrown away, however. It was stored in the Jerusalem temple, and when the winter rains made the marble courtyard slippery, it was spread on them to reduce the slipperiness. Hence, salt that has lost its saltiness is trodden under foot of men. Gotcha. Of course, we use it along the same lines, when it snows, or we have gotten heavy snows in this part of the South before. Not nearly as much as they do a little further north, but salt the roads, to keep them from icing so bad, or to help the ice melt, stay off the road. Okay, at table. Okay. In a simple home, there was a common food pot, placed on a rug, and the family sat cross-legged around the pot. A piece of thin bread was used to scoop out the contents. When Ruth ate with the reapers, she was invited to eat in this way. The table, mentioned in the Old Testament, is therefore nothing but a rug spread on the ground. That's something that like, if you don't know this, like when you read Psalm 23, that's what you're going to picture in your head, is like a raised table, like a dinner table. But the picture is there more so what is common with the custom, a rug where people would sit around, but on the floor. Only the wealthy would own a table, and chairs or couches as we know them. Joseph entertained at such a table in Genesis 43:33-34. David had a seat at King Saul's table in 1 Samuel 25:18. And Jesus reclined at table in the house of Simon the Pharisee. A description of the elaborate meals given as part of social life follows on page 212 through 222. We're not going to read that, but we may flip and look at the pictures, because this is the hospitality chapter. Yeah. I think it's the whole chapter is what he just referenced. Yeah, it is. Talking about getting ahead of ourselves. So this is hospitality. When you would welcome guests, the greetings, and how you would accommodate them, removing the shoes, washing their feet. A picture there that really kind of shows the hospitality in 2:17. Jerusalem, and this is what I was talking about. A Jerusalem street market vendor greets Israel's president with bread, salt, and a kiss in the traditional manner. Oh, is that lentil stew on page 219?
It looks amazing.
It does look good. Barley stew with lentils, a primary source of protein, B vitamins, and dietary fiber for the people of Bible lands. Got to get them B vitamins. Okay, yeah, here, page 221. There you go. That's a rug. You see the common pot there. And the bread there that's laying on the rug. Yeah, there you go. The 19th century photograph of Druce from the Carmel region feasting on traditional foods is redolent of feast of biblical times and reminds us of the Last Supper. Note that this is an exclusively male occasion and that the participants are sitting on the floor and sharing communal plates of food. And then here, the next page, you see a more modern Jewish family joined to celebrate Seder or Passover, the traditional meal to remember the Exodus from Egypt. And I've actually participated in one of those. It'd be kind of hard to do now, but it used to be part of the manners and customs class. They used to have to prepare the Seder, the Passover meal. Yeah. I don't know, we might look at something like that.
Got a kitchen?
We have somebody who can go.
And
The necessities.
that was part of it. Was the students prepared it? It was all the students that they prepared the meal, but that there is a lot that goes into it. We might look at it when we get closer to that chapter. Maybe the feasts chapter toward the end of the book. Okay. Finishing out here, hygiene. The Jewish diet was generally good for health. For instance, Daniel and his friends looked far healthier on a vegetarian diet than did their companions who ate the king's meat in Daniel 1:5-16. The Jewish food laws gave a good degree of protection from food poisoning when cooking temperatures were low. The biggest health problem concerned the water. Now, I would note this. The biggest health concerned the water, which was easily polluted through animal usage, washing, sewerage, and plain dirt. So I would just note the biggest health concern was with water. When water was collected in a cistern, it had run off the mud and brushwood roof where all manner of things had been stored. So a lot of times a cistern, the top would be removed when it rained so it could be filled. It would probably be placed in an area where it could collect the runoff from the roof. And, we remember from reading in the last chapter, a lot of stuff was stored on the roof. No telling what kind of rodents or stuff had been up there. No telling what was being collected in the cistern. So still yet, even though you had your own water there that you'd collected, still a health concern there. For this reason, wine was a staple drink. Paul probably had water problems in mind when he recommended that Timothy should take a little wine because of your stomach. Probably at the advice of Luke, the physician. All right, verse 53, or page 53. Illness. Sickness was not linked in thought with food and drink. It was normally attributed to the will, even the judgment of God. And for this reason, doctors were not approved. Okay, I would note that. For that reason, that sickness was attributed to the will of God or the judgment of God, doctors were not approved. Prayer was believed to be more effective than medicine, and Hezekiah is a prime example. Let me turn that one up there. 2 Kings chapter 20. Oh, yeah. Hezekiah is warned of his death. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death, and the prophet Isaiah the son of Amoz came to him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Then he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech thee, O Lord, praying. That's his reaction. I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. And then we see the Lord's words to Isaiah there in verse 5. Turn again and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer. I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee. On the third day thou shalt go up unto the house of the Lord, and I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and thy city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. Amen. Doctors could therefore cause loss of faith in God. But by New Testament times, Luke's skill as a doctor was appreciated by Paul at Colossians 4:14. Although Peter's skepticism recorded by Mark concerning the woman with the hemorrhage is clear to see. Okay, let's look at these references in the New Testament here. Colossians 4:14. Colossians 4, verse 14. Luke, the beloved physician, and Demas greet you. And then Mark 5:26. You go ahead if one of y'all want to read it.
It says, and had suffered many things of many physicians, had spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse.
Okay. Reported by Mark. Okay. Peter's skepticism.
Who is Demas?
Demas is a companion of Paul at that time. Luke and Demas were with him at the time of that writing. So he's brother in the faith. I'm still I'm confused by what he's saying here. Peter's skepticism. Okay, right. My bad. This is often, Mark is often called it's the gospel of Jesus Christ according to Mark, but actually according to Peter, because it's Peter's account. Peter's the witness here, and Mark is recording it for him. So I guess that's what the author here in our textbook is pointing out. I was confused. I was looking for something that Peter was saying here in the text, but failed to remember who it was written and whose account it is. Okay. All right. Well, we'll look at this last little picture here. Mary's well in Nazareth. Water was required for both cooking and washing. So very pretty well. All right, so next week we're going to go over chapter 5, family. We'll test on chapter 2. And I'm going to, here in the next couple hours, work on the study guide for chapters 3 and 4. And so I'll hand those out at before y'all leave at the end of y'all's next class. Wow, I can't believe we went the whole period right here at the end of it. All right. Well, we didn't have a test. Any questions or comments? Well, I guess we'll have a word of prayer and close out the class for the day. Either one of y'all want to lead us in that?
Hello.
Go ahead.
Lord, we come to you today just thankful for the opportunity to be here, Lord, to be in good spirits, good health, and good state of mind where we can receive this knowledge about you, learn more about you, and draw closer to you, Lord. If there are any prayer requests that are unspoken, Lord, you know what they are. Just we pray that your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.